The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal, its dome open to the stars above. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their designated sections, each area designed for the unique needs of their species. The Korthak delegation required seats that could support their massive armored frames. The Veltari floated in pools of liquid methane, their tentacles dancing through the cold fluid as they communicated through bioluminescent patterns. The insectoid chiracs hung from the ceiling in silk cocoons, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's soft lighting. At the center of this vast assembly, Admiral Zexatai of the Korthak Empire stood on the speaking platform. His 8-foot frame was covered in natural bone plates that had been polished to a mirror shine. 2 sets of arms gestured as he spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix that allowed all species to understand each other. Fellow members of the Galactic Hegemony, Zexatai began, his tone grave. We face an unprecedented threat to our peaceful order. The species known as humans have become a danger that can no longer be ignored. A holographic display materialized above the platform, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots marked human colonies, and there were far too many of them. When humans had first achieved faster-than-light travel 200 years ago, they controlled only their home system. Now red dots scattered across the outer rim like a spreading disease. In just 2 centuries, Zexatai continued, these creatures have established over 300 colonies. They expand faster than any species in recorded history. Our scientists cannot explain how they achieve such rapid growth. A chittering sound came from the Chirac section. Ambassador Click-Thax descended on a silk line, her mandibles clicking in agitation. The humans ignore all established territorial boundaries, she said through the translator. They settle in systems we marked as off-limits. When we send diplomatic protests, they claim they never received our messages. From the methane pools, the Veltari representatives' tentacles flashed in patterns of deep purple and orange. The translator interpreted their concerns. The Veltari report disturbing mental emanations from human worlds. We detect what can only be described as chaotic determination. Their thoughts follow no logical patterns we can predict. This statement caused murmurs throughout the assembly. The Veltari were known throughout the galaxy for their psychic abilities. If they could not read human minds, it suggested something fundamentally wrong with human brain patterns. There is more, Zexatai said, raising his voice to restore order. Our intelligence networks report that humans are developing technology at an impossible rate. They have gone from primitive chemical rockets to quantum-fold drives in less time than it takes most species to master basic metallurgy. The holographic display changed, showing images of human ships. They looked crude compared to the elegant curves of Veltari vessels, or the geometric perfection of Korthak battleships. Human ships were blocky, covered in armor plating, and bristled with weapons that seemed to be bolted on as afterthoughts. But appearances deceive, Zexatai warned. These ugly ships carry weapons that can match our finest technology. Worse, humans modify their equipment constantly. Every ship in their fleet is different from every other ship. They do not follow standardized designs. Ambassador Theiss of the crystal-skinned Luminar rose from her seat, her body catching and refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Surely you exaggerate, Admiral. We have observed human behavior for decades. They are violent, yes, but also primitive. They still use projectile weapons alongside energy systems. They have not even achieved basic immortality technology. That primitive nature is exactly what makes them dangerous, Zexatai replied. Other species develop along predictable paths. We understand how civilizations grow because we have seen the pattern repeated thousands of times. But humans ignore these patterns. They advance in random directions, combining technologies that should not work together. The display showed footage from a recent border incident. A human patrol ship had encountered a Korthak heavy cruiser in disputed space. The human vessel was 1/10 the size of the cruiser, with weapons that should have been completely ineffective against Korthak armor. Yet the footage showed the human ship not only surviving the encounter, but actually disabling the cruiser's main engines before jumping away. How is this possible? Demanded Ambassador Theiss. We are still analyzing the battle data, Zexatai admitted. The humans appear to have used modified mining lasers, focused through salvaged Veltari crystals, powered by a reactor design that our engineers insist should explode instead of generating energy. Yet it worked. The chamber erupted in concerned chatter as representatives discussed this information with their delegations. The idea that a primitive species could combine technologies from different civilizations in ways that actually functioned was deeply troubling. High Counselor Zareth, the ancient leader of the hegemony, raised one withered appendage for silence. His species, the Eternal Architects, had founded the galactic government over 10,000 years ago. When Zareth spoke, all other voices fell silent. "The pattern is clear," Zareth said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Humans represent a chaotic element that threatens our ordered galaxy. They do not follow the established rules of civilization. They do not respect our territorial agreements. They develop technology in ways that make no logical sense." The High Counselor paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "If we allow them to continue their expansion unchecked, they will eventually threaten our core worlds. Their unpredictable nature makes them impossible to contain through normal diplomatic means." Ambassador Seren of the Peaceful Harmony Collective spoke up, her melodious voice carrying notes of concern. "Surely there must be a solution that does not involve violence. The Harmony has successfully mediated disputes between incompatible species before." "We tried peaceful contact," replied Zexthai. "Human diplomats are polite enough, but they make agreements they do not keep. They promise to respect boundaries, then establish new colonies the next day. When confronted, they claim the colonists acted independently. They have a saying, 'It is easier to ask forgiveness than permission.'" This statement caused visible distress among several species known for their orderly nature. The concept of individuals acting without proper authorization was alien to most galactic civilizations. "The situation demands decisive action," High Counselor Zareth declared. "But we are not barbarians. We will not simply exterminate them without cause. Instead, we shall test their capabilities. If they prove to be a manageable threat, we can establish proper containment protocols. If they prove too dangerous," why, he did not need to finish the sentence. Every representative understood the implication. "I propose we send our finest warriors to conduct precision strikes against their outer colonies," Zexthai said. "Not to commit genocide, but to demonstrate our power and gauge their response. We will use this opportunity to study their capabilities and determine the appropriate level of force needed to contain them." The vote was swift and unanimous. 47 species agreed that humanity needed to be tested. They would send their most elite forces, their greatest champions, their most feared warriors. Surely these primitive humans would surrender when faced with the galaxy's finest. As the council session ended, and representatives filed out to their respective ships, none of them noticed the small maintenance drone that had been recording everything from a ventilation shaft. The drone quietly made its way to a communication relay and transmitted its recordings to a seemingly empty cargo freighter in the system's outer asteroid. The freighter's human crew received the transmission with grim satisfaction. They had been monitoring council activities for months, waiting for exactly this moment. Now they knew what was coming. Time to prepare the welcome party. The mining colony on Kepler 442c looked like a typical human settlement from space. Ugly metal buildings scattered across the planet's surface with no apparent pattern. Mining equipment and cargo containers cluttered the landscape. Ships came and went at irregular intervals, carrying loads of rare minerals back to human space. To the 5 Zephyrian shadow hunters observing from their cloaked vessel, it seemed like an easy target. The Zephyrians were the galaxy's premier assassins, beings who existed partially outside normal space-time. They could phase through solid matter, becoming invisible and intangible when needed. For 3,000 years, no Zephyrian strike force had ever failed a mission. Commander Vexthor studied the colony through his ship's sensors. His species looked almost human in their solid form, except for the silver lines that traced patterns across their dark skin. These lines glowed faintly when they prepared to phase shift. "Primitive defenses," reported Lieutenant Kieran, her voice carrying the characteristic whisper of their kind. "Basic energy shields, simple projectile weapons, standard sensor arrays. They have no phase detection equipment." "As expected," Vexthor replied. "Humans have never encountered phase-capable beings. They cannot defend against what they do not understand." The mission parameters were simple. Infiltrate the colony, eliminate key personnel, destroy critical infrastructure, and gather intelligence on human capabilities. The attack would serve as both a test of human defenses and a demonstration of galactic power. "Begin the approach," Vexthor ordered. "Remember, We are here to study as well as destroy. Take recordings of everything. The Zephyrian ship moved, closer to the planet, its cloaking systems rendering it invisible to human sensors. As they entered the atmosphere, the 5 warriors prepared for phase shift. Silver lines across their bodies began to glow brighter as they tapped into the dimensional energies that allowed them to exist between worlds. One by one, they phased out of normal space-time and passed through the hull of their ship. To outside observers, they simply vanished. But the Zephyrians could still see each other, existing in the same phase dimension while remaining invisible to normal matter. They descended toward the colony like ghosts, passing through the planet's surface and emerging inside the main administrative building. The plan was to eliminate the colony director first, then move to the mining control center and finally the communications array. Vexthor materialized in the director's office, his form solidifying as he returned to normal space. Behind the desk sat a middle-aged human woman, reviewing data on a holographic display. She looked up as he appeared, and Vexthor expected to see fear in her eyes. Instead, she looked annoyed. "You're 3 minutes late," Director Chen said, checking her wrist chronometer. "We detected your ship entering the system 47 minutes ago." Vexthor froze. This was impossible. No species had ever detected a cloaked Zephyrian vessel before. "Oh, and boys," Chen continued, speaking to the empty air. "Your friends are in the mining control center and the comm array. Might want to let them know the jig is up." Alarms began blaring throughout the colony. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. Through the office windows, Vexthor could see human workers running to defensive positions with practiced efficiency. "How?" he demanded, his training overriding his shock. "How did you detect us?" Chen smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Dimensional phase shifting creates gravitational anomalies, basic physics. Your people might exist partially outside normal space, but you still have mass. Mass affects space-time. We've been tracking dimensional distortions for the past 6 months." She pressed a button on her desk. "All teams, this is Control. Execute Operation Welcome Mat." The building shuddered as something heavy moved in the walls. Vexthor tried to phase shift, intending to escape through the floor, but nothing happened. He remained solid, trapped in normal space. "Phase inhibitors," Chen explained conversationally. "We reverse-engineered the technology from some strange readings we picked up near the Altair system. Turns out if you generate the right kind of electromagnetic field, you can lock beings into whatever dimensional state they're currently in." Through his comm system, Vexthor heard the panicked voices of his team. Lieutenant Kiran was trapped in the mining center, unable to phase shift. Sergeant Thalix reported similar problems at the communications array. All 5 Zephyrians were stuck in normal space, vulnerable to conventional weapons. "This is impossible," Vexthor said. "Humans have never encountered phase shift technology before." "Haven't we?" Chen asked. "You might want to check your intelligence networks. We've been finding a lot of interesting things in deep space. Wrecked ships from species we've never heard of, carrying technologies that shouldn't exist. We're very good at reverse engineering things." The office door burst open and 4 human soldiers entered, wearing armor that looked primitive but functional. Their weapons were clearly modified, with additional components welded onto standard human rifles. Energy readings from the weapons suggested they were far more powerful than they appeared. "Stand down," ordered the lead soldier, his weapon trained on Vexthor. "You are now prisoners of the Kepler 442C Colonial Defense Force." Vexthor looked at the humans with new understanding. These were not the primitive beings the Council believed them to be. They had somehow prepared for an attack from enemies they had never encountered, using technology they should not possess. "Who are you people?" he asked. "We're miners," Chen replied. "But we used to be other things. Some of us were soldiers, some were engineers, some were scientists. When humanity started expanding into space, we brought our skills with us. All of our skills." The lead soldier kept his weapon steady as he spoke. "My name is Sergeant Torres. I used to design experimental weapons for Earth's military. When I retired, I thought I'd try peaceful mining. But old habits die hard. When we started finding alien technology in asteroid fields, I couldn't help but wonder how it all worked. Through the windows, Vexthor could see human defenders moving with military precision. These were not panicked civilians. They moved like experienced soldiers, taking cover behind fortifications that had not been visible from space. The mining equipment you observed, Chen continued, doubles as construction gear for defensive positions. Those ugly cargo containers are actually armored bunkers. The ships coming and going aren't just carrying minerals. They're part of a communication network that keeps all human colonies in contact. Lieutenant Kiran's voice crackled through the comm system, strained with pain. Commander, they're using some kind of electrified nets. I cannot phase shift, and the energy discharge is considerable. Surrender, Lieutenant, Vexthor ordered. There was no point in continuing a hopeless fight. All teams, stand down. As human soldiers escorted him from the office, Vexthor tried to understand what had happened. The Zephyrians had attacked with their finest warriors, using technology that should have been completely beyond human understanding. Yet the humans had not only detected them, but had prepared specific countermeasures. How long have you been preparing for this? He asked Chen. About 3 years, she replied. Ever since we detected long-range surveillance of our colonies. We figured someone was watching us, probably deciding whether we were a threat. So we decided to be ready when you made your move. But you could not have known what kind of attack to expect. Chen laughed. We didn't. So we prepared for everything we could think of. Phase shift detection, energy weapon defenses, biological contamination protocols, psionic shielding, temporal distortion alerts. Humans are really good at being paranoid. As they reached the holding cells, Vexthor realized the true scope of the disaster. The Zephyrians had not failed because they were weak or unprepared. They had failed because the humans were something the galaxy had never encountered before. A species that prepared for threats they had never seen, using technologies they had never encountered. The last thing Vexthor heard before the cell door closed was Director Chen speaking into her communicator. Operation Welcome Mat complete. All targets secured. Send a full report to Earth Command and tell them to prep the next phase. Something tells me the Galactic Council is just getting started. In space above the planet, automated beacons launched from hidden positions throughout the system. They would carry recordings of the battle to human colonies across the outer rim. Every human settlement would know that the galaxy's elder races had made their first move. And every human settlement would begin preparing their own welcome mats. War Chieftain Grokmar of the Ragnar Goliaths stood 12 feet tall in his crystalline armor, each plate forged in the heart of a dying star. His weapon, a gravity hammer capable of cracking moons, hummed with barely contained power. Behind him, 11 more Goliaths prepared for planetfall, their massive forms filling the transport bay of their assault ship. The Goliaths were legends throughout the galaxy. In 3,000 years of warfare, they had never lost a single warrior. Their crystal armor could withstand temperatures found in stellar cores. Their weapons could shatter mountains. Most importantly, their mere presence on a battlefield caused enemy forces to flee in terror. The human fortress world approaches, reported Shipmind Velka, the AI that controlled their vessel. Designation New Stalingrad. Population approximately 12 million. Defensive rating, minimal. Grokmar examined the tactical display. The human world looked like a fortress, but a primitive one. Cities were arranged in geometric patterns, connected by transportation networks that followed predictable routes. Defensive installations were clearly visible from orbit, positioned according to basic military doctrine. Predictable, Grokmar rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Humans think in straight lines. They build their defenses where textbooks say defenses should be built. The other Goliaths chuckled, a sound like rock slides. These creatures had conquered 47 worlds without losing a single warrior. What could 12-foot giants in star-forged armor possibly fear from humans? Begin orbital bombardment, Grokmar ordered. Destroy their space-based defenses, then we land and finish what remains. The first barrage targeted the obvious military installations. Orbital defense platforms, communication arrays, and power generation facilities vanished in brilliant explosions. Human ships attempted to intercept the Goliath vessel but were easily swatted aside by superior firepower. Minimal resistance, reported Velka. Human defensive capabilities appear to match previous intelligence estimates. Preparing for surface deployment. The 12 Goliaths dropped from orbit in individual assault pods, each one a meteor of destruction that carved a burning crater in the planet's surface. They landed in a perfect formation around New Stalingrad's primary city, ready to advance and crush all resistance. But as the smoke cleared from their landing sites, Grokmar noticed something wrong. The city was empty. No panic in the streets, no civilians fleeing in terror. The entire urban area appeared to be abandoned. Velka, scan for life signs, he ordered. Detecting approximately 10 million humans in underground facilities, the AI reported. They appear to have evacuated the surface entirely. Cowards, spat Grokmar. They hide underground like vermin. We will dig them out. The Goliaths began their advance toward the city center, their massive forms crushing abandoned vehicles and debris underfoot. Each step left deep impressions in the pavement. Their armor gleamed in the pale sunlight as they moved in perfect formation. That was when the first building fell. The explosion came from underneath, not above. The entire structure collapsed sideways, tumbling directly into the path of the advancing Goliaths. Grokmar barely had time to raise his gravity hammer before 50 stories of reinforced concrete crashed down on his squad. The impact would have killed any normal species instantly, but Goliaths were made of sterner stuff. They emerged from the rubble essentially unharmed, their crystal armor cracked but intact. Grokmar roared his anger at the sky. "Orbital strike on our position," he demanded. "Level this entire area." "Negative," Velka replied. "Unknown energy signatures are interfering with targeting systems. The humans appear to have activated some form of orbital jamming." Another building fell, this one directly behind the Goliaths, then another to their left. The humans were collapsing their own city in a carefully planned sequence, creating a maze of rubble and debris that channeled the invaders into specific areas. "They are hurting us," realized Lieutenant Thakmor, the youngest of the Goliaths. "Like prey animals." "Impossible," Grokmar replied. "We are the hunters, not the hunted." But even as he spoke, he could see the truth of it. Every path through the rubble led in the same direction. The fallen buildings created walls that funneled the Goliaths toward the city center, where the tallest structures still stood. As they approached the central district, Grokmar heard a sound that made his blood run cold: human laughter. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the ruined buildings through hidden speakers. "Welcome to New Stalingrad," said a human voice, speaking in perfect Goliath language. "We've been expecting you." The attack came from above. Thousands of small objects dropped from the remaining buildings like a metal rain. Grokmar's first thought was that the humans were throwing rocks at them. Then the objects began to move with purpose, swarming around the Goliaths like angry insects. "Combat drones," identified Thakmor, swatting at the devices with his massive hands. Primitive technology. But these drones were not attacking the Goliaths directly. Instead, they attached themselves to the crystal armor and began generating intense electrical discharges. The energy had no effect on the armor itself, but it flowed through the crystal lattice structure, conducting directly into the Goliaths' bodies. Grokmar felt his muscles seize as electricity coursed through his nervous system. Around him, his warriors stumbled and fell as the current disrupted their motor functions. The crystal armor that protected them from physical damage had become a conductor for electrical attack. "Clever," he admitted grudgingly, even as he fought to remain standing. "They do not try to break our armor. They use it against us." From the buildings around them, human soldiers emerged. But these were not the disorganized rabble Grokmar had expected. They moved with military precision, wearing armor that looked crude but functional. Their weapons were clearly designed for fighting large opponents, firing projectiles that exploded into entangling nets. "Fall back," Grokmar ordered, trying to shake off the electrical interference. "Regroup and advance in dispersed formation." But the humans had planned for that too. As the Goliaths attempted to retreat, they found their path blocked by new obstacles. Mobile barriers had emerged from hidden positions, creating a box canyon with no exit. Worse, the barriers were electrified, carrying the same current as the drone swarms. "We are trapped," reported Sergeant Krolvar, his voice strained from the electrical assault. "The humans have prepared a killing ground." Through the chaos of battle, Grokmar heard more human voices. They were coordinating their attack through radio communications, speaking in rapid bursts of tactical jargon. What impressed him most was their complete lack of fear. These tiny creatures were fighting beings 3 times their size and showing no hesitation whatsoever. "Sir?" called a human voice from a nearby rooftop. "This is Colonel Martinez, New Stalingrad Defense Force. I'm authorized to accept your surrender." Grokmar roared his defiance, raising his gravity hammer despite the electrical interference. "Goliaths do not surrender." "Figured you'd say that," Martinez replied. "Okay, boys, light them up." The buildings around the plaza erupted in brilliant flashes as human soldiers fired weapons that should not have existed. Grokmar recognized the energy signatures. Modified mining lasers focused through crystalline lenses that looked suspiciously like Veltari technology. The beam struck the Goliath's armor and actually began to heat the crystal matrix to dangerous levels. "How do they have Veltari focusing crystals?" demanded Thakmor. "Trade," Martinez answered, apparently monitoring their communications. "Amazing what you can buy when you offer rare earth minerals at competitive prices." The Veltari are surprisingly practical about business. One by one, the Goliaths fell, not killed outright, but systematically disabled by enemies who had studied their strengths and prepared specific countermeasures. Electrical overload weapons, entangling nets designed for large targets, mining equipment converted into siege weapons. Most importantly, tactics that turned the urban environment itself into a weapon. As consciousness faded, Grokmar heard Colonel Martinez speaking into his radio. "This is New Stalingrad Control. Operation Giant Killer complete. All targets neutralized with minimal friendly casualties. Recommend immediate prisoner transfer to Facility 7 for debriefing." The last thing Grokmar saw before the sedation took effect was a human medic approaching with what looked like first aid equipment. Even after defeating them completely, the humans were going to treat their wounds. In orbit above the planet, ship-mind Velka recorded everything. The AI's processors struggled to comprehend what had happened. The Goliaths were the galaxy's finest heavy assault troops. They had never failed, never lost a single warrior. Yet 12 humans with modified mining equipment and basic military tactics had defeated them completely. More disturbing, the humans had clearly studied Goliath physiology and combat doctrine in advance. They knew exactly how crystal armor conducted electricity. They knew how to exploit the psychological advantages of large size. They had prepared for an enemy they should never have encountered. As Velka transmitted its report to the Galactic Council, one phrase kept recurring in its analysis. Humans fight wars like they solve engineering problems. They identify the parameters of the challenge, then design solutions that turn every advantage into a disadvantage. The Eternal Shepherds had not walked among mortals for 10,000 years. These ancient beings had transcended physical form long before most species had discovered fire. They existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their consciousness spread through layers of reality that lesser minds could not even perceive. When the Galactic Council awakened them from their meditation with desperate pleas for aid, the three shepherds found the request almost amusing. Mortals wanted help dealing with other mortals. How could any physical species threaten beings who existed beyond the boundaries of space and time? But the Council's report was troubling. 2 elite strike forces had failed completely against these humans. The Zephyrians and Goliaths were considered among the galaxy's finest warriors. Yet both had been defeated by what should have been a primitive species. The first shepherd, who had not chosen a name since ascending beyond mortal concerns eons ago, examined the tactical reports with something approaching curiosity. These humans fought in ways that made no logical sense. They combined technologies from different species despite having no understanding of the underlying scientific principles. They used their own mortality as a tactical advantage, accepting casualties that would break any civilized army. Most disturbing was their apparent ability to prepare for threats they had never encountered. How did a species with no exposure to phase shift technology develop countermeasures against it? How did they know to use electrical attacks against crystalline armor? "They learn," observed the second shepherd, its consciousness touching multiple probability streams simultaneously. "But not through normal educational processes. They appear to reverse engineer solutions from incomplete data." The third shepherd, youngest of their kind at a mere 5,000 years of transcendence, focused its attention on human space. The mental emanations from their worlds were unlike anything in the galactic database. Where most species showed ordered thought patterns, humans displayed chaotic creativity that defied prediction. "They do not follow established patterns of development," the third reported. "Each individual human creates unique solutions to problems. Their collective knowledge grows exponentially because they share these individual innovations. Irrelevant, declared the first shepherd. No mortal species can threaten beings who exist beyond physical reality. We will demonstrate the futility of resistance by erasing their homeworld from existence. The three shepherds focused their combined will on the Sol system, where humanity had originated. They would simply remove Earth from the timeline, unmaking the planet and everything on it. A clean, efficient demonstration of power that would force the remaining humans to submit. But as their consciousness approached the human home system, the shepherds encountered something impossible: resistance. Earth's orbital space was filled with devices that should not have existed. Quantum entanglement disruptors that interfered with multidimensional perception, probability cascade weapons that created chaotic feedback in precognitive abilities. Most impossibly, the shepherds detected human minds that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Fascinating, whispered the second shepherd. They have attempted to replicate our transcendent state through technological means. As the shepherds attempted to focus their power on Earth itself, alarms began sounding throughout the human defense network. On Luna Base, Admiral Sarah Chen watched her instruments register energy patterns that should have been impossible to detect. Contact confirmed, she announced to her staff. 3 entities manifesting across 17 distinct dimensional frequencies. Beginning Operation Prometheus. Throughout the Sol system, human volunteers activated experimental quantum consciousness devices. These machines, built from principles reverse-engineered from ancient alien ruins, allowed human minds to fragment across multiple dimensions. It was a dangerous process that few humans survived intact, but those who did became something new. Beings who could fight enemies that existed beyond physical reality. Dr. James Morrison was one of 12 humans who had undergone the consciousness fragmentation process. As the quantum field generators activated around his medical chair, his awareness suddenly expanded across dimensions he had no words to describe. He could perceive the shepherds now, vast intelligences that dwarfed his mortal mind. But he was not alone. 11 other humans joined their consciousness to his, creating a collective awareness that spanned multiple realities. Together they began to fight beings who considered themselves gods. The battle existed outside normal concepts of space and time. In the dimension where thoughts became reality, human imagination clashed with alien transcendence. Where the shepherds tried to unmake Earth through focused will, human consciousness created probability shields that deflected the attack. Where the aliens attempted to impose order, humans introduced chaos that disrupted their control. Impossible, the first shepherd declared, its voice echoing across 17 dimensions. Mortals cannot exist in our realm. We're not trying to exist here permanently, Morrison replied, his fragmented consciousness somehow maintaining coherence across multiple realities. We're just visiting, and we brought friends. From Earth's surface, massive quantum cascade weapons fired directly into the dimensional battle space. These devices weaponized the uncertainty principle itself, creating localized reality storms that damaged even transcendent beings. The weapons should not have worked according to any known physics. But humans had never been concerned with what should be possible. The second shepherd attempted to retreat to a higher dimensional state, only to find human consciousness following it there. These mortals had somehow learned to navigate realms that took most species millions of years to perceive, let alone access. How? Demanded the third shepherd, its own consciousness beginning to fragment under the assault. How do you fight in dimensions you cannot understand? We don't need to understand them, replied Dr. Sarah Kim, another of the fragmented humans. We just need to break them. Humans are really good at breaking things we don't understand. The battle raged across subjective centuries while only hours passed in normal time. Human consciousness, supported by quantum technology and powered by desperate creativity, gradually began to overwhelm beings who had considered themselves beyond mortal reach. The first shepherd made a final desperate attempt to escape, pulling its consciousness back toward the higher dimensions where it had meditated for millennia. But human pursuit followed, and something called a quantum depth charge detonated in the space between realities. The explosion scattered the shepherd's consciousness across 17 dimensions, fragmenting its identity beyond any hope of recovery. The other 2 shepherds suffered similar fates as human weapons designed to fight impossible enemies proved devastatingly effective. As the dimensional battlefield cleared, the surviving humans began the careful process of reassembling their fragmented consciousness. Of the 12 volunteers, only 7 survived the experience with their sanity intact. The others would spend the rest of their lives in specialized care facilities, their minds broken by exposure to realities they were never meant to perceive. Dr. Morrison was among the survivors, though he would never again be entirely human. As medical teams worked to stabilize his quantum-scattered awareness, he managed to send one final transmission to Earth Command. "This is Prometheus team," he whispered, his voice carrying harmonics from other dimensions. "Mission accomplished. Targets neutralized. But Admiral, we need to talk about what we saw out there. The galaxy is stranger than we thought, and we've barely scratched the surface." On Luna Base, Admiral Chen received the transmission with mixed emotions. They had won an impossible victory against enemies that transcended physical reality. But the cost had been enormous and the implications were terrifying. If humans could learn to fight gods, what did that make them? The answer came in the final transmission from the dying third shepherd, its consciousness scattering across dimensions as it spoke. "We were wrong. These are not mortals. They are something else. Something that should not exist. They fight the universe itself as if it were an enemy to be conquered." As the last echoes of the shepherds faded from reality, automated systems throughout human space began analyzing the battle data. Engineers on a dozen worlds started designing new weapons based on what they had learned. Scientists began theorizing about the next level of threats they might face. And in the deepest levels of Earth's quantum research facilities, volunteers signed up for the next round of consciousness fragmentation experiments. Because somewhere in the galaxy, there had to be something even more dangerous than gods, and humans intended to be ready for it. Admiral Zexthai sat in the ruins of his once magnificent command center on Korthak Prime, staring at reports that should have been impossible. In the span of 6 months, humanity had gone from a species marked for elimination to the most feared military force in the galaxy. The human response had been swift and terrifying in its precision. They had not struck randomly or in rage as most species would have done. Instead, they had systematically targeted the personal strongholds of every council member who had voted for the elimination protocol. Not their homeworlds or civilian populations, but the specific facilities where the galaxy's rulers had thought themselves safe. The worst part was how they had done it. Every assault used technology reverse-engineered from the very forces sent to destroy them. Zephyrian phase shift drives allowed human stealth ships to penetrate any defense. Goliath crystalline armor had been adapted into nearly invulnerable human ship hulls. Most impossibly, the quantum manipulation principles, stolen from the Eternal Shepherds, had given humanity a faster-than-light drive that could cross the galaxy in days rather than months. The Veltari embassy has fallen, reported communications officer Krillin, her voice hollow with shock. Human forces used modified phase technology to infiltrate their methane seas directly. The ambassador's pool complexes were drained in minutes. Zexthai closed his eyes, trying to process the magnitude of the disaster. The Veltari were telepathic pacifists who had not engaged in warfare for over 5,000 years. Their embassy was supposed to be neutral territory, protected by ancient treaties. "Casualties?" he asked. "None," Krillin replied, and somehow that made it worse. The humans drained the methane, but they provided portable breathing apparatus for all Veltari personnel. They were taken prisoner, not killed. This was the pattern that confused and terrified the galaxy's military analysts. Humans fought with devastating effectiveness, but they seemed determined to avoid unnecessary deaths. They targeted infrastructure and command personnel, while making elaborate efforts to protect civilians and non-combatants. "Sir," called tactical analyst Gorix from his station, receiving transmission from the Kirax Collective. "Their mountain fortress on Kepler 88 has been compromised." "How?" Zexthai demanded. "That facility is carved into solid rock 3 miles underground. Humans used modified mining equipment to drill precision tunnels directly to the command center," Gorix reported. "They bypassed all surface defenses entirely. The Chiracs report that human engineers somehow created a network of tunnels that shouldn't be structurally possible, but apparently they are." Zexthai felt his forearms trembling with exhaustion and stress. In his 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered an enemy like this. Humans did not simply defeat their opponents. They studied them, learned from them, and then turned their own strengths against them. What about the Luminar Crystal Gardens? He asked, dreading the answer. Captured 12 hours ago, Krillin replied. Humans used weapons that generated specific frequency vibrations. They shattered the crystal matrices that the Luminar use for thought processing. No permanent damage. But the entire population is effectively paralyzed until they can regrow their cognitive crystals. The communications board chimed with an incoming priority message. Zexthai activated the display, expecting another report of defeat. Instead, he found himself looking at a human woman in a simple blue uniform. Her rank insignia identified her as a commander, but her bearing suggested someone accustomed to much greater authority. Admiral Zexthai, the human said, speaking in perfect Korthak language. My name is Commander Elena Vasquez, representing the United Nations Space Command. I believe we need to talk. You are in no position to negotiate, Zexthai replied, though his voice lacked conviction. The Galactic Council will never surrender to a primitive species. Commander Vasquez smiled, but there was no mockery in her expression. Admiral, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. We're not interested in conquest or revenge. We're interested in solving a problem. What problem? The problem of a galactic government that tries to exterminate entire species when they become inconvenient. Vasquez replied. Look around you, Admiral. We've been fighting for 6 months, and how many council members are actually dead? Zexthai realized with shock that she was right. Despite the devastating effectiveness of human attacks, the death toll among galactic leadership was surprisingly low. Captured, yes. Humiliated, certainly, but not killed. We've been watching your council for 3 years, Vasquez continued. Do you want to know what we've learned? You're not evil. You're just stuck. You've built a government based on maintaining the status quo, and when something new appears, your only solution is to eliminate it. The humans threatened galactic stability. Zexthai protested. How? By colonizing empty systems? By developing technology too quickly? By not following your established patterns? Vasquez shook her head. Admiral, we never wanted to fight you. We just wanted to be left alone to grow and develop in our own way. The human commander activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked human-controlled space, but Zexthai was surprised to see that human expansion had actually slowed since the conflict began. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy, Vasquez explained. We're trying to fix it. Do you know how many species the Council has contained over the past 1,000 years? How many developing civilizations have been suppressed because they didn't fit the expected patterns? Zexthai did know, though he had never thought about it in those terms. The Council maintained order by preventing change, and change required eliminating anything too different from the established norm. The Talix Confederation was destroyed for developing biotechnology too quickly, Vasquez continued. The Nephirim were scattered because their art was considered memetically dangerous. The Zoral had their homeworld quarantined because they practiced democracy instead of oligarchy. Each example hit Zexthai like a physical blow. He had participated in some of those actions, believing he was maintaining galactic peace. But viewed from a human perspective, the Council looked less like peacekeepers and more like oppressors. What do you want? He asked finally. We want to dismantle the systems that allowed the Council to exist, Vasquez replied. Not through conquest, but through liberation. We've already contacted 43 species that were suppressed by Council actions. We're offering them the same thing we offered the Veltari: technology, protection, and the right to develop their own way. The communications board lit up with incoming messages. Reports from across the galaxy showed human fleets arriving at former Council territories, but not as conquerors. They came as liberators, offering to free species that had been held under galactic protection for centuries. This is impossible, Zexthai said. You cannot manage a galactic government. Humans have been spacefaring for only 2 centuries. You're right, Vasquez agreed. We can't manage a galactic government, so we're not going to try. Instead, we're going to teach every species how to defend themselves, how to develop their own technology, and how to solve their own problems. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. Admiral, we've studied your personal record. You're not a monster. You served your people faithfully according to the laws and customs you understood. But those laws created a system that could only maintain peace through oppression. Zexthai felt something break inside his chest. For the first time in his long military career, He was forced to confront the possibility that everything he had fought for was wrong. "The Council will never accept this," he said weakly. "The Council doesn't have a choice," Vasquez replied. "Half their member species have already declared independence. The other half are negotiating surrender terms. The age of galactic oligarchy is over, Admiral. The question is what comes next." As if summoned by her words, the communication system activated again. This time the caller was High Counselor Zareth himself, the ancient leader of the Eternal Architects. But the being who appeared on screen bore little resemblance to the proud ruler who had ordered humanity's destruction. Zareth looked old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scaled hide had lost its luster, and his multiple eyes showed the dullness of defeat. "Admiral Zexthai," Zareth said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia, "I have just signed the formal dissolution of the galactic hegemony. You are hereby relieved of all military obligations to the Council." The ancient being paused, studying something off-screen. "The humans have offered me a position as historical advisor to their new... what do they call it? The Galactic Cooperative. They want me to help them avoid the mistakes we made." Zexthai could not speak. The government he had served for 3 centuries was simply gone. "Admiral," Commander Vasquez said gently, "we'd like to offer you a similar position. The galaxy still needs peacekeepers, but ones who protect diversity instead of suppressing it. Are you interested?" 6 months later, Admiral Zexthai stood on the observation deck of the human vessel New Harmony, watching as representatives from over 200 species gathered for the first Galactic Cooperative Assembly. The meeting was chaotic, with dozens of different species arguing.